Welcome to Sales Training for Podcasters, the podcast designed to better your sales process. We'll be sharing tools, tips, and techniques, whether you love sales or hate sales. If you've got a product or service to sell and a podcast, you've come to the right place. Now, here's your hosts, podcast strategists Doug Sandler and JJ Flizanes.
Hey, so welcome back to Sales Training for Podcasters. My name is Doug Sandler. On the other side of the microphone, who is that? Is that JJ Flizanes over there?
It is. It's JJ Flizanes.
What is going on? And we have a third side of the microphone today. We have this guy. We're going to call him this guy because Scott is actually so much more than just a guest on the show. He is a seasoned sales professional, Scott Ingram. Scott is the host of Sales Success Stories and Daily Sales Tips for Podcast or Daily Sales Tips podcasts. Those two, right? Just those two?
Those two. Well, actually, there's a third one. I have an inspired marketing podcast as well.
Oh my gosh, very cool. So he is definitely a believer in the podcasting world. He's been podcasting since October 2016, I think was the far back episode of Sales Success Stories. Is that right, Scott?
That's right.
He's the author of 3 books, Sales Success Stories, B2B Sales Mentors, and Finding Sales Success on LinkedIn. So you know he knows his sales stuff, and I'm excited to have him here. We are excited to have him here today. Scott, welcome to Sales Training for Podcasters.
Glad to be here.
Hey, I want to start here because this is the area where most, we tend to work in this tight circle of these, 50 to 100 podcasters that we know. Very rarely do we stray from that group. And then I sent an email out to maybe 15 or 20 podcasters that I said, here's the qualifications. You got to have 100 podcast episodes. You got to have 100 reviews, and you've got to be consistent. And you've done all 3 of those things in the 4 years that you've been podcasting. Does it feel like you've done anything different than most podcasters that are out there? Or are you just doing your daily stuff?
No, I think it's kind of sticking with the game, right? The shows kind of grow over time, right? So I had run Sales Success Stories for a little over 2 years and realized that the 2 best things about that show, and I was pretty intentional about the cadence because I think the word you said that is so important is consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, out of the gate, I decided, you know what? A weekly show might just kill me. And so I decided I'm just going to do a bi-weekly show. So every other week, and I knew that was something that I could maintain and be consistent about. But after a period of doing that, never missing a time, I realized the 2 best things about my show were the 2 worst things about the show. And one is they're super deep dive. I've been called the Tim Ferriss of sales. I deconstruct world-class sales performers. So I only interview active quota-carrying individual contributor sales professionals, and they have to be either the outright #1 top performer in their company, or they work for a company like Microsoft or LinkedIn, and I'm willing to settle for the top 1% in those scenarios. Well, that precludes me from talking to a lot of people that I'd love to talk to. And I realized that the length, the depth was intimidating. If you don't know what my show is and you don't know what you're getting into, and you look at the list of episodes and you're like, oh my God, these are 2-hour interviews sometimes. So I created literally the exact opposite show. I created daily sales tips, and I have not missed an episode. It's a 7-day show. I haven't missed an episode in the 700 and however many episodes.
Wow! So I didn't even click on that one yet. So it was 7. You have 700 episodes of that. Way to go!
That's right. Haven't missed a day. And the consistency is so key.
So tell me about these top 1%ers and these top dogs in their companies. If it's a smaller company or whatever, I'm assuming these guys have like $1 million plus quotas in some case, and they're able to maintain that, and they've been maintaining that over an extended period of time.
That's exactly it. So I definitely look for consistency, right? Every now and then you find sales professionals who I call it hitting the sales lottery, right? They got lucky. They walked into a big deal. I really look for the consistency. And I am one of those people. So I carry a multi-million-dollar sales quota myself. All of this podcast stuff is just a giant side hustle for me.
Okay.
Leads me into the question I have about it, because it is a commitment, and it's a commitment to again, this consistency of regular content, having these conversations. Did you start your podcast? I noticed on your first episode of sales success stories, a lot of S's, sales success stories, that you did a really bang up job about like doing your homework and doing your research and practicing, and really you were just so articulate and scheduled, if you will, in the delivery of that, and the message and what you're going to expect and what I'm going to do and what this is not. And it was really eloquent. And I kept wanting to say to myself, well, okay, so what's in it for you? Is it that you, again, that phrase, the Jim Rohn quote about that you are the average of the 5 people that you hang around most, were you looking to sort of up level, or just wanting a community of people to talk to, and that's why you started your show?
Yeah, that was really it in the beginning. For me, it was a missing voice in the sales space. So I have always been a student of the sales. Doug, you'll be proud to know that I am a Sandler President's Club graduate.
Yes, another
right?
one.
So way back in the day. I mean,
hey,
that was
thank you for college. I appreciate that.
Right,
You know,
right.
25 years ago, going to college on guys like you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. But having been a student of sales for it at that point, over a decade, and I've read lots of sales books and consumed a lot of this content because I always wanted to get better. The missing voice for me was the people who are in it right now. Because if you look at the folks who are writing those books and delivering those keynotes, they haven't had their own quota in years and sometimes decades. And not to discount the value that they bring to the community. I was like, there's just this missing voice.
Mhm.
I want to hear from the people that are in it right now, having extraordinary levels of success in this environment. And who knew how amazing that would be, that I'd be able to hear from people who are having extraordinary success in a COVID environment. And all the unique challenges that come with that. So initially, yeah, I really didn't have any kind of profit motive other than I want to get better myself. A lot of the things I create from an entrepreneurial perspective have always been to scratch my own itch. And I figure, look, if this is useful and valuable to me, I'm sure there's other people like me who will also receive value from this.
I resonate with your story and with you, because when I started my first show, Fit to Love, it was a 6-day-a-week audio and video show.
Ooh.
I had 2 days a week that were like 3 camera shoot, really good production quality videos. And then 4 days a week were just audio, either interviews or solo shows. And the reason why I did a 6-day-a-week show, I am a full-time entrepreneur. I did it because I had so much content that I wanted to share. And I also wanted to test my market. I wanted to see how people wanted me to show up, because the clients I was working with as a personal trainer, nutritionist, and life coach didn't really want to hear about the spirituality, law of attraction, psychology, better yourself, take responsibility, emotional, intellect, and IQ kind of thing. They didn't want to hear about it. So I wanted to put out like into the world, where should I be showing up? It was almost just a test, a big test. And I also wanted to find, and what I didn't know when I started, I wanted to find, like you, I wanted to find that conversation. The one that I really wanted to have was about law of attraction, manifestation, astrology, intuition, meditation, sort of how we're all connected, physics, quantum physics. That's the conversation I really wanted to have. So when I broke up my 6-day-a-week show into 6 different shows after 2 years and 350 episodes, the one show that I had nothing to monetize with, like literally it was just a passion project, like your show, a passion project that feeds your soul and your brain and your, everything about you. That show blew up because now I'm resonating with other people looking for the same conversation. So when you started your show, what was the trajectory of people reaching out or responding? Do you have more of a relationship with your guests or your audience?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's actually more with the guests. And I talk to a lot of people. I think we think about this whole podcast thing backwards. I think of the audience as that's the gravy. That's the extra.
Yes.
The beauty of a podcast is it is the ultimate relationship building tool.
Oh my gosh. You're a man after my own heart. You are 100%. Keep going, man. Cause you're preaching to the choir when you're talking to me. Now, maybe with JJ, maybe slightly differently, because she's created this amazing environment and this amazing community where she's created her own economy. And I don't want to downplay that at all. As a matter of fact, it's probably maybe even a better way to go is doing it her way. But I completely relate to what you're saying. So expand upon building the relationship with the guests. That's been like the hidden gift in podcasting for me. So talk to me more about that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think it's actually a more natural way to lead to the other one, right? If you're trying to lead to, oh, I'm trying to build this perfect thing and I'm trying to grow this audience first, I think that's getting harder and harder to do. There's just
Mhm.
so many damn shows out there, and it is so hard to break through the noise and get attention. I actually maintain a list of every active sales podcast I can find. I've been maintaining it since 2017. And when I do the update this weekend, that list is going to go over 300 active
Wow.
sales focused shows. And I'm
We
going to
on
be
there?
adding your show to the list this
Yay!
weekend.
Okay,
Thank
good,
you.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean it's an incredible thing. So I think the best case here is actually the Inspired Marketing Show. So in my day job, I work for a professional services firm, and our clients are enterprise organizations that are leveraging the Oracle Marketing Cloud suite of solutions.
Mhm.
And Inspired Marketing really created just sort of a platform for me to talk to our customers and people who I would like to become our customers about just the great things that they're doing, the successes that they were having in marketing. And it is the ultimate sales tool.
Yeah.
I get on cold outreach, I get about an 80% response rate because this outreach is unlike any other sales thing, right? It's not like you need to talk to me about my thing and it's all about me, me, me. This is all about them.
Yeah.
Like you are doing really cool, amazing stuff in the marketing world. You need to come tell us about that.
Yeah.
And for almost everybody I've had on, it's a novelty. They've never been on a podcast before. So
Mhm.
here's an opportunity to do something new. They're marketers, so they understand kind of the personal branding value of it, but it's just an opportunity to tell their story. And just by the nature of the way that I structure that process, we're going to have 3 or 4 conversations. We're going
Yeah.
to have a quick little chat before the interview and talk about what we're going to talk about and where are we going to focus and what's the story that we're going to tell. And then we're going to go through that conversation. And part of it is the way that I structure the conversation. But there's another big part. I always tell people the magic happens before and after, mostly after you turn off the recording. And especially with these Fortune 500 marketers that I'm interviewing, because a lot of the things that they're sharing, they're having to be a little bit guarded. They
Mhm.
can't tell all the secrets. There's some proprietary things going on. There were some weird political, personal dynamics going on. And I swear, as soon as we're done recording, they have a need to unburden themselves. Right? It's like, Scott, okay, look, here's the thing I couldn't tell you. Here's what was really happening behind the scenes with that thing. And then the very next thing they ask, and part of it is because again, the way I structured the conversation is we've talked about, hey, you've gone on this great adventure. If you could start over again, what would you do different knowing what you know now?
Mhm.
And then I talk about, well, like what's next? Where do you go from here? You accomplished amazing thing A, what's amazing thing B gonna be? And there's something about that dynamic that they ask me, wait, Scott, doesn't your organization like help people with this? Is this something you could help us with this next big project we're working on? It's the most natural transition to a sales conversation I have ever experienced in my life. And now we're like friends.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is, to me, that's the key to a successful podcast. Again, partly it took me though. And again, part of it is I want to find out from you, how long did it take you to realize that was really the magic for you in this podcasting space? And honestly, it took me almost 2 years. It took me a little under 20 months to figure out that the magic was really in the interview, not in the community. And then the trick was for me to try to develop a system so that I could do it and not make anybody uncomfortable in the process. And I think that's a part of human nature, is I didn't want anybody to feel uncomfortable with it. So number one, how long did it take you to discover that? And secondly, you say that people are naturally inclined to ask you, "Hey, Scott, isn't this something that you do for a living? Don't you help people fix that problem?" But there's certain words that you're probably saying or a feeling or vibe that you're giving them to draw that from them. So can you help me with those two answers?
Yeah. So the first answer is I saw it pretty quickly. And in fact, I think I went in kind of recognizing
You're a smart
the
guy.
the possible. Well, I'm a sales guy, right? So
Yeah, me
I
too. It
saw the
only took me 2
possibility.
years though, and I'm Sandler's kid, so it's like,
Yeah.
what the hell was I thinking?
Yeah. So again, it was an early recognition. I think the second part of it is, and I think it's so important that you called out, like, this needs to be natural. It needs to be something that's not forced. And part of the mindset that I have around it is i- it's really not my agenda, right? My primary agenda is one of intense curiosity and just asking the right questions and allowing them the space to tell their story. And through that, I think that serves as a relationship and trust accelerator, because I've created sort of a safe, comfortable space for them where again, just the fact that they are immediately willing to unburden themselves afterwards, it says something about the dynamic that we've created. And then I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds, and I'm not trying to manipulate, but there are kind of some psychological principles in effect here. And it's kind of this need to reciprocate, like, wow, Scott, you're doing all this for me and you're going to promote this episode. And with that show, we've actually turned that into printed magazines that we take to some of our largest trade shows. And we've put, how cool is it to put your star podcast guest on the
Mhm.
cover of a magazine?
It's good stuff.
So we put the CMO of 3M on the cover of a magazine. They don't do that.
Mm.
Right. So, we were able to just create amazing things. And it's y- so much of what I've done and tried to do. And I've even kind of smashed some of the stereotypes that I had in my own head in the learning that I've had from interviewing just the best of the best sales professionals. Is this isn't a manipulative thing. The very best sales professionals also happen to be some of the very best humans. And the reason they do so well is because they care so much. And then financial rewards and the performance, all that other stuff comes as just a benefit of having done a great job and having been a servant leader in this way.
Amen to that. We started this show because Doug comes from Sandler and all about the sales, and I come from more of a sort of acting, professional background, personal training, singing, dancing. I'm that like creative, expressionistic kind of person, and sales wasn't something you looked at in a good light. And
Right.
when I got into podcasting, so after I launched Spirit, Purpose, and Energy, and I got the response that I got from a community, I didn't have any products, I had nothing to sell them, I had nothing to give them, I had just nothing except episodes. And so from there, my community spoke, and then we built a relationship. And then over time, I've literally created everything I've created to serve them. So to me, from the beginning, I've never sold them something they didn't ask for or they didn't need. And so for you with this trajectory of having these conversations and it leading naturally into serving them, I want to ask a question about your sales background before your sales training. So again, Doug was born into it. It's part of his background. I was not. And there's a psychological, idea to get over of it being manipulative, of being it sleazy. And so this show was to help other podcasters who are mission-based podcasters who get into podcasting, sort of like you did, but without the sales background, who want to have great conversations, that want to share with the world, that want to contribute, but have no idea and hate the word sales. So this was to bridge that gap and to sort of address all the different psychological points about selling from different angles, how you can do it, why everybody coming on to share their stories about their background in selling and so forth. So for you, I want to go back to before you were selling stuff. Did you always know you wanted to sell, and what was your relationship with selling prior to getting into sales training?
Yeah, it took a while. I started my first company when I was 20 years old. And for the Breaking Bad fans out there, this happened long at Breaking Bad came much later after I'd sold the company. But the name of the company I created was Gray Matter Technologies.
Nice. Very
And it
nice.
was, an IT consulting company. And I learned very quickly in that you don't actually have a company if you don't make sales and you don't have clients. So it very quickly became sort of trial by fire. Oh my gosh, I better figure out this sales thing, or I'm not really an entrepreneur. I'm not really a CEO. And that's how it came. And then over time, as I got better at it, as I got more comfortable in it, I fell in love with it. So when I sold that company, that was in Southern California, and we kind of cashed out of California in 2004, and I've been riding this epic wave in Austin ever since 2005. I realized, not having had that business and having an opportunity to sort of choose, wait, what do I do? And when you're used to wearing all the hats and being responsible for every dang thing, I really just thought about what was my favorite part. And I like, you know what? I really just loved the sales part. I loved being in that position to help my clients. And I could just do that. I could work for a great company where I don't have to worry about all of the HR and finance stuff. I don't have to worry about all the operations and customer service. Like, I can just do my favorite part and have these conversations and help these other companies achieve their goals. That's a dream. And so that's really how I've come to this and landed in this space that I am. I just kind of fell in love with that piece of what sales is.
So on your interview shows, the ones that you have an opportunity to interview these top 1%ers and these high achieving salespeople, obviously there's going to be some common denominators for these salespeople that are out there. Can you think of some that come to mind immediately? And first thing that come to mind for me is just people that are just great relationship builders. That seems like that might be an obvious one, but is that the same thing that you're finding? And if beyond that, what happens next?
Yeah, a lot of times, maybe not universal. The one thing that is universal is great salespeople. There is no one way. There is no recipe. There is no one personality style. About half of the folks that I've interviewed on that podcast lean towards introversion. You would expect, oh, you have to be extroverted and you have to, be super outgoing. Yeah, not true. There's a lot of amazing introvert sales professionals, and I think the real key, the thing that unifies all of that, is they have figured out what it is about them and their style and their approach, and they've really doubled down on that and embraced that. And that's the way they sell. And that's why they're so great. They're not trying to be somebody else. They're trying to be the best version of themselves. And with that, one of the other just core things, I talk a lot about belief. I think there's kind of three core pieces of belief that great sales professionals have. They believe in their product, right? You have to know that what I'm going to be offering to someone is something of value. It's something that is worth being paid for.
Mhm.
And then they have to believe in themselves, and they have to believe in their process and the way that they kind of go about this. And those are some of the core things. And I think there's also just this commitment to, this is a craft. This is a profession. Like, this is something we all take very seriously and want to be great at. And it just takes a ton of work and it takes a ton of time. This isn't, you snap your fingers, or you read one book, or you go to Sandler training for 3 months and voila, you're an amazing sales professional. It takes a little bit more work than that.
Do you see some commonalities or more contrast between a C-suite type of salesperson and an entrepreneur? Because, as an entrepreneur, and I know you probably have seen this through doing all the interviews that you have, in my mind, the entrepreneur is someone that really, really thinks outside the box, thinks creatively, and almost thinks like, we'll sell it and then we sell it and we will build it. On the other hand, you're dealing in enterprise sales. It's like, hey, there is a box that you have to fit a lot of your products and services into. And if you don't, then you won't be having that job, for very much longer. So tell me what your thoughts about, that C-level person versus the entrepreneur.
I think they have more in common than they don't. And the key thing is, it's in the creativity. And there's so many ways to be creative. So, when you're in those enterprise sales situations, the creativity can be in the way that we structure the deal, the way that we work through the negotiation and the contractual nuances, and the way that maybe we work with a professional services partner that's going to help implement a piece of technology that I might be selling, right? So there's a lot of team selling. Sales is not almost ever a solo act. This whole lone wolf thing is mostly garbage.
Hmm.
The great sellers have to do so much coordination between people inside their organization, connecting them with people inside the customer and client organization. There's just a lot of and you can even say like relational creativity, right? How do we connect those dots? How do we make sure that everybody is on the same page and moving in the same direction? And there are a ton of leadership elements at play. So when you think about that C-suite or that entrepreneur, they're leading a team, they're leading their organization. Well, the same is true of a great seller, right? They're leading that prospect, they're leading their team in the way that they're putting that deal together. And again, the great sellers are, I don't like the word close, because to me, when I have a client sign a contract, that's actually where the relationship starts.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right now, the work begins. So that's not the close. That to me is actually more of a beginning than it is an ending.
I'm glad to hear you say that because that I think defines a lot of why people don't love the word sales is because they think it's about just getting the sale and then running. And so I think sales gets a bad rap for some people because it's about just getting the money and it's not about the delivery of the relationship or the product or the service or the process. And so that's cool. Can I ask you a completely woo-woo question? You don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
Go for it. I live
She's
in
gonna,
Austin.
she's
Like
gonna,
I'm pretty good with the woo woo. Bring
she's
it.
gonna ask you your sign. I have a
Yes, I'm
really
going to ask you your birthday. I don't need your year. What's your birthday?
Oh, yeah, that's okay. February 3rd. It's coming up.
Okay, Aquarius. Okay, cool. So you have that sort of big picture thinker, lots of ideas, concepts, sort of ahead of the game. Cool. I thought, and I bet if I did your chart, I'd also find some Sagittarius. I don't know. I feel that in you, like that curiosity, and that because you have your show, right? A lot of people wouldn't put the time, energy, and effort into paying for and actually doing a show, which is actually giving to other people. But it also, in this process, as you have outlined, is ability to connect with like-minded people, learn from them, pick their brain, spread the knowledge up the level, so to speak. In that process, though, and again, you also have a product offering. When we teach sales training, Doug, he calls it guest to client strategy in the podcast world. So I want to move into the sales training in podcasting. So sales success stories, as you said in the beginning, didn't necessarily have a monetization strategy when you started it, correct?
Correct. Although it was profitable from pre-day one.
Yeah, I was listening. You had some sponsors, even on your opening episode. I was listening to that. You had some sponsors right out of the gate, didn't you?
Correct. Yeah. So I actually had a $10,000 sponsor before we even launched the show. So I sort of shared a vision with them and said, hey, look, here's what I want to do. Here's what that sponsorship looks like over the course of these first, I think it was the first 3 months or the first 6 months that we did that.
Good for you, man.
Did that deal. And so, yeah, I was listening to your intro episode, and I've never been in that position where I've come out of pocket to pay for my own show. It has always been profitable, and now it's becoming a lot more profitable.
Scott, I had to create a production company so that so that I could figure out a way to pay for all of this. It has been such an amazing adventure, and I had no idea where any of the income was coming from. I started my podcast, as those in our community may or may not know the story, depending on whether they're fans of the Nice Guys on Business podcast, our other show. I started a podcast to promote a book that I had coming out, and I was in a completely different career. Somebody in our community actually said to me, very similar to, hey, build the relationships and they will come. Somebody in our community said, hey, can you teach me how to build a podcast the way that you have done this? And I said to him, I said, Lou, I have no idea how to do that or even what to charge you. But if you'd be open to sharing what you pay for that, I would consider it. So we came to an agreement on this is what we were going to do. And that was the beginning of our production business and kind of like the start of the end of my professional speaking business at the time. And it has been a great adventure. But, when we think about selling when it comes to podcasting, we think about things like joint venture partnerships that you get from that guest seat. We think about affiliate relationships when you sell a product or service closely aligned to what you are selling. The guest to client strategy when you have somebody sit in that chair that potentially could buy what you have. Opportunities for sponsorship and advertising on your show. Hey, selling your services to the people that are in your community. Yeah, that's in there as well. When it comes to selling and your podcast, like, what do you think of? I mean, you have a show that is actually, it's a little meta because you're talking about selling, and you are a salesperson, but you really don't go at it with the approach that I'm going to sell. So how do you end up making any conversions from what does a conversion look like for you if you're using your podcast as your quote unquote, your tool?
Yeah. Well, this show is meta if my show is meta.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So let me call out, because I really want to mention these two books, and the beauty is other people wrote them, so I didn't have to, because they are literally my playbooks. The book that I read going into launching Sales Success Stories is a book called Content Inc., written by Joe Polizzi, and Joe started the Content Marketing Institute. And
he was a guest on our show. He's a good guy.
Oh, I love Joe. Joe is just such an incredible dude. Had a podcast, great podcast, for years. And then there's another book written by James Carberry, and James is the host of the B2B Growth Show and runs his own production agency called Sweetfish Media. He wrote a book called Content-Based Networking. Between those two books, that's pretty, like, if you want to dig deeper into what I'm doing, it's all pretty much there. But Joe's book in particular, like the Content Inc. concept of, rather than creating a product and then trying to sell that and fail because you don't have anybody to sell it to, instead create an audience and ask the audience what they want. And then when you create that, you have a built-in market, and you're much, much, much more likely to be successful. And so that's the approach that I've taken. And I've taken an extraordinarily patient approach, because here I am. It's been 4.5 years and I still have my day job, frankly, because I'm a pretty good sales guy and I make a lot of money in my day job. So there's no good reason to leave that. But it's over time, as we built the show, what I recognized in the conversations that I was having with the folks that had been on the podcast, and the mentoring relationships that were sort of emerging from that, I mostly knew that the most valuable thing I could possibly do would be to bring them together. Because being number one is a very lonely place. You don't have anybody else inside your organization to look up to learn from, to go chase down. And so I wanted to bring them together. So the first thing we did is we created the Sales Success Summit, which we've now produced 3 times as an annual event. Unfortunately, in 2020, it was a virtual event. But that actually, I think in a lot of ways, has accelerated my success and my process, because it forced me to figure out or go down and deeper down a sponsorship path that I wouldn't have pursued as aggressively if I was just more focused on, frankly, bringing a couple hundred of my friends together and delivering an incredible experience. So the selling is, this is going to sound weird. I almost unsell this, because for me, what makes my event so powerful is who's there, the mindset that they bring, and just, it's all of those interactions. All I do is bring the most amazing people I can find, put them in a room together, and after that, it doesn't really matter what I do. Well, it's going to be amazing.
You're going the Zig Ziglar approach: give enough people what they want, you'll get what you want in return. So that
1,000%, 1,000%. I love that quote. It is a driving force behind this organization for sure. And so I actually, if I have to sell somebody, if I have to push somebody into coming to my event, I don't want them to come. They're not the right fit. So it's very kind of counterintuitive in that way. But if I really have to push somebody to come to my event, they will make it less for everybody else.
I want to raise my hand. I want to be at your event. I want to speak at your event. I want to be there.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
calm down.
that's been the other sort of brilliant thing is the only folks I allow on the stage, because again, it's this missing voice that I'm trying to capture and bring to the community. So the only people on the stage are the folks who've been on the podcast, and by definition, they're top 1% world-class level performers.
Yeah.
And you can't find that anywhere else. There's no other event that does this.
Well, I would imagine that you have a way that you attract all the people in that come to the event. Is it that are is it more than just the podcast, or are you plucking all the people out of your podcast listeners?
Yes. So it's both, right? So the curation of the content, right? As I'm building the agenda and the program and the presentations for that, all of that comes from those who have been on the podcast. Now, the audience is a mix. The audience is other folks who've been on the podcast, but it's also the audience, because that was the other thing I wanted to bring is not only do those of us who've been on the podcast and connected that way need to have an opportunity to get to know each other and to interact, but my super fans who are just super deep and who are investing hours and hours listening to this stuff, they need that opportunity to connect with these guests too. And they're not going to be anywhere else. Like there's not another place that they can go and where they're going to run across a dozen of the people that they have heard on the podcast. So it's just kind of win-win all the way around. And JJ, it's an attraction strategy.
I mean, Scott just gave me just such a great idea. I mean, I don't even know why I have never thought of this. I mean, we've had 850 guests on our show in the last 6 years. I could do a summit just with 100 of 100. I could do it with 30 of those guests. The Joe Politzis and the John C. Maxwell's and the Jeffrey Gittimers, Ariana Huffington, and Gary Vaynerchuk. I mean, I'm just like, holy shit, I could actually put together a really cool summit. I'd never even thought about it.
Here's another idea you're welcome to steal.
Do it.
So the books that have spun off of the show, so that's another thing that happens. And let me be very, very clear. Do not try to do a book based on your podcast using the transcripts. It will not work. You will want to end your life in frustration because the way that we speak does not look good in print. However, so what I did is I have asked my guests to write stories for a book. So they have to write the stories, and it works really great going the other way. Once they've written a story, then having them record themselves reading those stories, and we've created audiobooks, and that's my favorite format, right? So
that's great too.
Yeah, the first Sales Success Stories book is 60 stories from 20 of these top 1% sales performers. And in the audiobook version, they all read their own stories. So you get all those different voices, you get their inflections, not my trying to pretend to be them and try and bring the emphasis that they would bring. It's in their own voice. So the idea is, and I'm going to thinking about using this for a different purpose. I mean, I'm like the Tom Sawyer of authors, right? I have my friends write my books for me, and I just put my name on the cover.
Good.
But the concept is, and this would be a post-COVID thing, but the idea is a book week retreat. So if you bring your podcast guests together, get like a giant Airbnb, bring a photographer, bring an editor, and in real time, collaboratively write a book. So in a week, you basically do the entire process.
I actually have done that. Not that, but what you said before that not to do. I have actually written an entire book that I did from transcription, but I did rewrite it, and I left some of the interview in interview style, and I took out some of the science because one of my shows is different than how we're talking right now. So it actually was easier to pick apart the stories and to sort of link things together. And I did write that book in a week, but I also agree with you. I wrote it and I was taking, I was using other people's stuff and crediting them because they had been on the show. And so I love that idea of being able to, and we actually have a podcast mastermind, and one of the members last week when we did her first VIP day, as I outlined her like production schedule and we looked at all of her funnels and all of the lead generation, I said, okay, and then now I'm going to blow your mind. And she was already overwhelmed. And I said, you're going to take all of those 5 shows that you talk about your method and you're going to transcribe them and you're going to start your book. And she was like, woo, like, oh my God. And I'm like, right. Because we're just taking and being efficient with how to use this content that you're creating. And not that it has to be published next week. And because it's only her, they're solo shows, right? So she's speaking her content. But as I digress, what I want to go back to with your show, and again, so the similarities across the board for both Doug and I, yours being guest to client strategy in the relationship sort of in the front end, but then in time, your summit, was your summit an idea that someone said, hey, can we get these people together? Or was this your idea? Did anyone in your audience reach out and give you feedback or questions or say, hey, when are you going to create this? Or I would love this?
Yeah, according to Content Inc., it was supposed to be the latter, but it was really my idea, and it goes back again at the heart of all of this stuff that I create. I am my avatar essentially, right? I created the show for me, so I just continue to create stuff that I really want, and so far it has aligned really well with what my audience wants as well.
I want to jump in because that's exactly what I teach everybody to do, because that's how I started. And part of it was, again, sort of, and you said this in your show, this is selfishly motivated. It's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
This is selfishly motivated because this is the shit I want to talk about. This is the stuff I think is important. This is stuff that I'm seeing you guys are not doing and you need, and you got to wake up if you want to have success in, mind, body, soul connection, and have the weight loss and have the health and have the relationship. You have to wake up to the things you're missing. And when I put it out there like that, it was really about attracting other people who wanted to hear more about that. It wasn't me trying to be vanilla or be a host that was going to interview somebody and be all nice and just be like, yeah. Like I wanted to dive into and uncover and disagree and argue and unpack things in a way that to me would resonate, because it's not about me coming in and necessarily being judgmental. It's about what resonates with me and the message and the motivation I have for doing the show. I don't want to have a conversation with anyone that I don't want to have a conversation with, which is why I never need guests, because for my regular show, because I handpick the people that I want to talk to, just like you do. And I choose them very wisely, and it's all very specific to the message. And it's what's attracted the right audience to me, which has then created all the products and the programs and the things. I mean, hell, I never thought I'd be a podcast coach. And that came out of left field because of being in the podcasting space and then having another down the line selling like really expensive masterminds and not delivering, and having those people be clients of ours or friends of ours, and then seeing them suffering and spending all this money and not getting any service and not getting any further. And I'm like, oh my God, I can help you. And then boom, here we are. It's always been out of like, I've been creating products and programs out of necessity to serve people, which to me never feels like a sale.
Right.
Even though there's a money exchange at the end of it. And it's really, in our work, getting podcasters to understand that when you start your show, give a shit like deeper than you think you should. And then when you end up creating something, it's because you're serving somebody to help them do something, not because you care that they're paying you whatever. I mean, again, the money's great and money's energy and it's what makes things happen, but it's not, there's nothing wrong with money. But if you're thinking short term, like what I think a lot of people do when they think of sales, oh, I got to get the sale. Okay. They sign, they pay, boom, I got the sale. And just like what you said, no, that's when the relationship starts. And if you're not aware of that or committed to that or care about that, then don't even bother.
Amen.
Yeah. Mic drop.
Amen.
Okay.
I think there's a couple other points there, right? Like coming back to this idea of building a show for yourself. The other thing that's going to do is you're always going to know the right question to ask. You don't have to try and put yourself in the shoes of somebody else. You just ask the stuff that you're curious about. You're like, wait, that was really interesting. I want to talk more about that. And that's what's going to be interesting to others in your audience who are like you.
Yeah, that's what I've been teaching. And I love to hear you say that, because I don't think anyone else has said that quite like that on the show so far.
The problem is though, that when we invited Scott on the show, I was so hoping that I would not get any ideas. And because he's just given me like 17 ideas. We're not short of ideas. We're short of implementation time. So like, I don't know what to do now. He's given me so many great ideas. Do we have to do all of them?
Well, so Doug, I've got a presentation I did at my own summit about 2 years ago where I talked about my 4P productivity process for producing profit, because I'm extraordinarily alliterative.
Yeah.
And that is actually my superpower, right? Because that's the thing that people look to me and they're like, wait, Scott, let me get this straight. You are responsible for a multi-million dollar quota during the day. You host 3 podcasts. You're doing these books. You're hosting this summit. You have kids and a family who still love you, and you actually manage to find time to sleep. How the hell do you do all of this? And it really is. I've spent a decade kind of refining and developing this process that allows me to be extraordinarily effective, because I am great with the ideas, but the ideas are useless if you don't
Yeah.
take the actions and you don't get to
Yeah.
the execution. And I've gotten quite good at the execution. And over time, as I've worked through this, my team has grown. And so I have a lot more people supporting me. Like, long gone are the days that I'm editing my own episodes. That was sheer hell. And you just kind of find the resources, and you find the people like, oh my gosh, this person is so good. Now, it took me, I had to go through a few editors, I had to go through a couple graphic designers and those kinds of things. But now I have this extraordinary team that makes my life a lot easier.
All right. So there's going to be a ton of people that are in our community that are thinking, well, he's totally got his shit together. And you do sound like you have your shit together, and that's cool. However, on the other side of it, I know there, just knowing it sounds like you're probably similar to me to the degree that you're always working on something. There's always something
Oh
that
yeah.
you are. So what's the self work that you're doing right now?
I had a really significant epiphany last year with one of our sponsors. So they built a process called the sales game, and I played the sales game with them. And the epiphany that I came out of that with was sales is leadership. So I'm on kind of a leadership adventure right now. I'm just really trying to develop, and it's a unique spin. I actually got some really great coaching and feedback on this, because the type of leader that I am, part of it is leading the team, right? All the folks that are helping support all of this work, but it's also leading a community. And even though it's not nonprofit, a lot of the work that I'm doing is kind of mission-based type of work. So I'm specifically kind of exploring that thread, right? And looking to great nonprofit leaders, because the reality is it's easier to manage a team where where I can get everybody aligned from a financial incentive perspective. It's totally different when you're kind of in a community and you've got people contributing to book projects, and I'm not sharing the royalties. That's not how it works. and these types of things, it's a different type of leadership. So that's the big thing that I'm kind of focused on this year.
As Doug was leading that question, and I was thinking, is he going to ask about sort of any of the challenges? because we only fine tune through contrast, right? We do it, and like you said, it was like painful for you to. I actually really, I do have an editor, but I do some of my own editing, especially on the shows that are dearest and nearest to my heart, that sort of challenge the status quo of the conversation that's out in the world. When I have those kinds of shows, or let's say it's a relationship show and I might want to mention my ex-husband, I have to just be careful that sometimes I want to not say some things. So there's no one else is going to know how to pick that out but me. And because I'm a full-time podcaster, this is my craft, and I love what I put out. There's so much heart and soul in every episode that I put out that I feel like my energy kind of infuses, and that's also led to the success of the show that I have. But again, we all learn by having something sort of blow up in our face. So at every point in time, and I've had one this week, and but that's how we grow. It's how we expand. It's how we get better, because it's not just a smooth sailing to success. There's some rough patches. So what could you share about any of those in this sales training podcasting journey, from not just podcasting in general, but podcasting with adding money, podcasting with figuring out, the nuts and bolts of it after you did all your research and your homework? You were very thorough in that, but then there's the journey. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know, because it's a co-creative experience. You put your stuff out there and there are people on the other side, and how they react to you and what they say and what they do, you can't even anticipate. So what were some of the things that kind of challenged you along the way?
Yeah. So I'm just going to call out 2020. And there were so many challenges last year. And I, I changed my mindset through that process. I love the challenge now, right? It's one of those things where, if you want to get stronger, you go to the gym and you get stronger because you challenge yourself, because you put pressure on yourself, because you do things now that you can't do, or that are going to kind of break you down. And the biggest challenge we had last year was really planning for this event, right? We were planning to host an in-person event in Austin, Texas in October. And, in March and April, we were kind of looking ahead going, there's no way that we won't be able to do the event. Like, of course, we'll have this sorted and solved by now. We'll be fine. But I started kind of thinking about, well, we ought to be thinking about a plan B. And as we got into kind of May or June, just the realization that this isn't going to happen. We're going to have to pivot this. And as we were working through that process, there were so many things that just went wrong that challenged us. But what started to happen is I collaborated with my team, and we would just, okay, here's the thing that's come up. How are we going to deal with this? And we got to this point where every time we would face one of those issues, our solution was better than what it would have been initially. And it got to the point where I was like, bring it on. Like, this is making us so much better because it's forcing us to be creative and get outside of the box and figure stuff out. And if we don't have the answer, let's talk to people until we find the answer. And now, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, that process changed the trajectory that I was naturally on. We were on a great trajectory. Things were going well. Things are going extraordinarily well right now because of all of those things that we had to figure out. And so we're so much better because of it. And, I'm sure I could find specific examples, but it was just the whole of that. And as a podcaster, there's so much stuff that goes wrong all the damn time. So, you've got to find the way through and anticipate and even plan a little bit for, okay, how am I going to react when something goes goofy? Because I promise something's going to go goofy.
Yeah, I love that because I, like you, have live events and have had live events to a year since 2018. So, come up in 2020, and I already had decided, and I did have one in January,
Very
and said that was
these live events.
said that my January 2020 live event would be the last live event till 2021. I have a very strong intuition. Not that I thought anything bad was going to happen. Just again, the way that it worked out, it was an alignment for me to say there'll be no more events till 2021. All right. So I was covered when it came to that, but it tested, I've been doing podcasting since 2014, but I broke up the shows in 2016. So it's really only been about 4 years that I've had this momentum with these individually better branded shows, if you will. And so I had challenged myself. Also, I had a pretty big enrollment time frame between mid-September, and let's say November 1st. And I didn't know what was going to happen because, like you said, we weren't having live events. And last year my enrollment happened at a live event. In fact, I had a live event, then a webinar, then another live event. Like I had all this time to enroll people and felt like I had to do it face to face. And then this year showed me without a shadow of a doubt that I've created my own economy. And it was scary and I didn't know what was going to happen. And then it was awesome because I went, holy shit, this was just from the podcast. Yeah. I don't have to do any live events. I can have someone who I've never talked to have a 5-figure, sell them a 5-figure process because they know, like, and trust me because they've been listening for years. And I don't need the weekend event. I don't need the live in person thing because they know, like, and trust me. Oh my God, I can let go of that to help this enrollment period. And I can just do the podcast. And that was so grounding and so powerful and so inspiring to know that that's the kind of community that I've created. That that the contrast at first was like, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to be able to enroll anybody? Do I need this? And it was truly the test 2020. So I hear you on that. And I'm sure the virtual event opened up so many possibilities to expanding in ways that you didn't anticipate. And maybe they're not ideal because we love getting together with people in person and there's nothing better than that. But under the circumstance, there were so many blessings at the same time. even though it's all crazy, but it's all, but so many good things have happened from that.
Yeah, that's it. And we started the show talking about consistency, and I think maybe a good place to end is talking about patience. I think this process takes a lot longer than you think it's going to take. It took me a lot longer than I thought it was going to take.
Oh yeah.
And hearing both of your stories, we're talking about long stretches ago that you started this, and there's so much learning that happens in that. So I would just let people know you have to be patient in this and just commit
So
to
true.
the long term, commit to that long game, and know you may not see it for quite some time, but it's those who persist that see the payoff.
I don't know why I don't see this as it's like, it gets me so frustrated. We'll have clients that launch their podcast and, 12 episodes in, they're like, hey, I'm not seeing any results. And I'm like, try waiting like a year and a half before you start seeing any results. They want to see it so quickly. And yet the work that has to go into it is just completely nullified because they're just looking for results like right now. And this as well as I do, I'm sure, is that although you may be somebody that tunes into your analytics, and we didn't even talk about analytics on the show, you'll never be able to cash in a download. So a download is actually worth nothing to you unless there's conversion that's involved with the download. So to go after a big audience but not have any conversion is not the goal of podcasting. And I am 100% agree with you. Consistency is key. We started there. Patience is absolutely key. And we can end there as well because, man, you're 100% right. If you're not consistent over a long period of time, you just can't be successful at podcasting. And you have to have all of that other stuff. And that's just the bare minimum that you need to have in order to be successful.
Yeah, I frequently come back to the concept and I see it over and over and over again. Most overnight success stories take 10 years.
Very true. Very true. I look back to when you mentioned Joe Polizzi's name. I had him on I went back to my archives, November 17th, 2015, episode 82. We're on episode almost 1200 right now. So talk about way, way back in the beginning of it. Scott, man, I so very much appreciate getting to know you over the last hour. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation just to figure out ways that we can help each other. I don't know that I'm any good in the tech world. I think I've fought myself out of a full-time job of ever doing anything other than knowing how an entrepreneur actually lives, eats, breathes, and sleeps. But I'm sure there's going to be something in there for us to be able to do together.
Yeah, absolutely. I have loved the meta conversation we got to have.
Totally great. JJ, any final words from you, or can I wrap it up here?
No, just thanks, Scott, for coming on. We appreciate you. Check out his show, Sales Success Stories, and the Daily Sales Tips.
That's it. Daily Sales Tips.
Excellent. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got as much out of today as we did. Check Scott out and his podcast. We'll have links in the show notes for you to quickly check him out. And we appreciate you. And we hope that this is making a big impact in your mindset about sales and, of course, on your pocketbook at the end of the day.
See you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to Sales Training for Podcasters. To get additional information and to access more amazing content that will boost your sales game, visit salestrainingforpodcasters.com. Hey, do us a favor. Rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, thanks for listening.